This 3D platformer was inspired by two games. One is Sonic Adventure 2, the other is Mario Sunshine. Now what I've been trying to figure out is what I should borrow from these games and what I should keep out. Mainly, the water nozzle from Mario Sunshine is something I've been dreading adding to my game. Mario Sunshine is a very unconventional 3D platformer. It's way different from every other Mario game, and it relies on the water pack for pretty much everything in the game. And when I started this game, I really only wanted to take a few mechanics from the water pack in Mario Sunshine. But I've been thinking for a while, what if I added the spray nozzle? I mean, I'm a new developer, so I'm not really trying to make a very difficult game, but I guess that's what I'm doing. This might be kind of dumb, but we're gonna see where it takes us. I figured I'd much rather fail and learn something than make a boring, successful game. So let's make this game more like Mario Sunshine. Now, before I walk you through what I've been working on these first couple of weeks, let's get this clear on what this game is not. This game is not a spiritual successor to Mario Sunshine. It is not copying the game to a T. It is not copywriting any material that should not be copyrighted. I don't want to get sued with Power World, so I'm good. So I'm not trying to test you. No, the structure of this game is a little bit different. Different enough that it's not going to play like Mario Sunshine plays. Most 3D platformers like Mario and other games like it borrow from it because it is the godfather of the genre. But this game, I would say, borrows more from a game like Ape Escape when it comes to the structure of the levels. I want each level to feel like a sandbox that rewards exploration and not necessarily a single objective. Now I realize that's done for a reason. There's a lot of easier ways to make fun levels when you know where the player is going to be. For example, some of the best levels in A Hat in Time are the more linear levels, while the levels that people dislike are the open world levels in that game. The thing is, it only sounds bad to have linear levels, but in practice it usually leads to a more fun experience. But there's always something I appreciated about those games, and trying to get that right is the inspiration for this project. I always wondered what it would be like if you took the flood from Mario Sunshine and you put it in more interesting situations. In my last devlog, I showed off the introduction of the game, and I had already implemented the hover nozzle, the rocket nozzle, and parts of the turbo nozzle. I had added the ability to shoot projectiles, but they didn't really have any functionality. Basically, it was just a bullet that shot and did absolutely nothing up to this point. The reason why I didn't have any functionality is because I didn't know if I actually wanted to add it to the game. See, the squirt nozzle is one of the worst parts of that entire game. It's fun to shoot water at things, but the controls where you have to stop and aim and slowly drag your controller around the screen makes Mario feel like a tank. If you lightly tap the button, it allows you to walk and spray, but you lose the ability to aim, and the game requires you a lot of the time to aim upwards and spray at things. The most fun way to use the squirt nozzle in Mario Sunshine is when you press shoot and jump at the same time, you get like this shotgun blast, or if you spin while you use it, you get this like sprinkler system. In fact, if you watch a speed run, they almost never squirt and they always spray. You get what I mean. Anyway, I just wanted to keep all the movement abilities and remove the squirt gun altogether. I will admit, if you play that game without the squirt nozzle, it just feels different. It's kind of cool to spray people with water all throughout the game and just run around like Grand Theft Auto with a water gun. I could run around Delfino for hours just spraying people with water for no reason. But to be honest, maybe I was a little intimidated because I'm not an experienced developer and I have no idea where to start adding in a water spraying mechanic into the game. I may be overthinking the mechanic a little bit, but it does seem very complicated. Water and fluid mechanics in games kind of scare me. If you look at things like fluid simulations and other games that feature water mechanics, it definitely can come off a little intimidating for a newer developer to add that to their game. One of the biggest issues with implementing this into my game is what am I going to be using to actually spray things with? Mario uses Flood, my character uses a jetpack, so it kind of doesn't make sense to use water spraying from a jetpack. I wanted the fuel or the fluid from the jetpack to be the resource, but I had no idea how to use that and turn it into sort of a weapon that you could spray from. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna just move forward with developing this without knowing how I'm going to do that. So we're gonna just skip the graphical part of the weapon and we're just gonna work on the water mechanic for now. so just roll with me for this one. Now, early on in development, I already made a water shader so that I can create the swimming mechanic for the game, but that's really just a single layer with some post-processing effects. I basically needed to start from scratch here. Usually, when working on a mechanic, you can go online and see how other people have done it. You can look at tutorials for similar mechanics, get an idea of where you want to start, but not for this specific thing. I couldn't find a single tutorial showing you how to spray water or how fluid simulations work as a weapon. This was made in the GameCube, so I didn't think they had a complicated particle system. So I was a little confused going about this. So I went and I played the game. I wanted to figure out a few things while testing this game out. What makes the water fun? How do they handle making things wet? How does it look? How does the collision work on that? Now, besides being fun and frustrating, I learned a couple things about Mario Sunshine. This is why I think the spraying really works well, because it's not using actual water, and that was a huge relief for me because I'm sitting here trying to make this complicated system. The spraying in this game is basically like using water bullets. So since the water lands in pellets, I don't need to overthink it and just make it like a normal bullet. So I was able to look up some tutorials for basic bullets in games and figure out how they're able to do things and make it feel good and look a lot better. I have not worked on an FPS up to this point, so this was new territory for me to kind of learn about how that even works. In other small games I've made that use bullets, basically the bullet just destroys itself on impact and it plays a little particle effect. But I realized what Mario Sunshine is using is something called decals. Decals are basically flat 2D images, and I needed one of them to basically follow along the normal of the meshes that were hit. So basically explaining what that means, it can bend around the corners of the mesh that it's touching. So if it hits a corner, it can bend around that corner and display the same 2D image. Now the problem went from understanding how decals work and how to use them to understanding how Mario Sunshine uses them. Now I just needed to figure out how I can spawn the decals in a way that was cost effective and wasn't going to cause a lot of issues. First, I went into Photoshop and I made a basic water droplet. I made a simple water splash effect, so now when you shoot the bullet, it looks like water is landing on the ground. Since decals are basically a 2D image, I was able to use the same water texture and apply it to the decal as well. So the water from the ocean also looks the same as the water from the bullets. Things were looking great and they were coming together, and so far so good. But there were two big things still missing. One, the water in Mario Sunshine isn't just a flat 2D texture. It feels like it has some sort of animation to it, and it doesn't just lay there as a flat texture. I needed to do a little more research and understand how that worked. And two, when you shoot FLUDD, there's a really cool spraying effect from the nozzle that I needed to figure out how to make. And particle effects is something I am not strong at. So let's figure out how I can replicate that. When I went back and I researched Mario Sunshine, I realized the water in that game really just slowly disappears. There is no animation, but it feels like it does because it disappears so quickly. So to be honest, that was really easy. I just created a system that as soon as the decal is spawned, it slowly shrinks into size and then destroys itself, which also fixed the problem with me spawning too many decals on the screen. It's almost like Nintendo had already solved all of these problems and made it as simple as possible. But as for the particle effects, I spent a good day watching tutorials and trying to understand the Niagara system a little more than I had already knew, trying to spawn particles for every bullet fired, or maybe while the button is held down, or maybe making them spawn bullets and then disappear when I'm no longer pressing it. I had so many different ways to try to figure this out, but again, I felt as if I was overthinking the problem. But for now, I figured this solution will be good enough. Great, now I can test it. Now I can have fun spraying the water that resembles Mario Sunshine. I can spray things with water, it looks good, they look like they're getting wet, and then the water slowly dissipates just like it would in the game. In fact, it was so good that I spent minutes wandering around spraying things with water just like I would in the original game. So I guess I got the effect that I was looking for. But I wasn't done yet. My game is basically a 3D platformer with FLUDD. So let's add some more Mario-esque mechanics like I said from the beginning. I already had implemented kind of a wall jump system, but I didn't have the wall slide. And the wall slide allows you to have more timed mechanics. It allows you to have more control, and it makes the character feel more contextual to the world. Right now, all of the puzzles and mechanics in my game just seem to make things run fast and go fast, but adding wall slide, if I'm able to add puzzles for that, would add a different pacing. Sliding is a bit janky though, so I will continue to test it out further, but as of right now, it does work and it's pretty cool. Speaking of cool, I added a guilty pleasure of mine, the somersault. Who doesn't love a good flip? I had added this in the beginning of development, but it was so janky that it didn't really make any sense for a while, so I just took it out. But let's be honest, it adds so much to basic movement that I added it back in. I changed the animation and made the character roll into a ball while you're flipping now, so you look like Samus and you're in this spacesuit, and Super Metroid is my favorite game, and I couldn't resist adding this back into the game. If you move consistently without stopping your character, you'll be able to flip as long as you don't stop moving. So it's kind of like a visual reward for speed or efficiency. And finally, the one mechanic I was kind of afraid of adding, but was surprisingly easy. The turbo nozzle in Mario Sunshine also allows you to run on water, and I had been dreading adding this to the game because I didn't know how it would work with my current swimming mechanic. Right now, once the player touches the water, they immediately enter the swimming animation in the swimming state, and I didn't want to change too much of that code and basically redo the entire swimming system just to add the running on water mechanic. But this was way easier than I thought it was going to be. Since I already put the dashing into the game, I simply just needed to create a system where once the player is dashing, they no longer can overlap the water and they now collide on it like the ground. Doing that immediately fixed the situation and the player no longer entered the swimming state, so now you can dash on water the same way that you run on the ground. Now if you're doing a super dash, you no longer can overlap the water, so you never start swimming and it pretends that it's basically the ground. I will still need to change the particle effects to make it look like you're running on water and not on the ground, but I figured that for now that's good enough. With me adding so many mechanics, I think the game is going to keep expanding in size, so my goal is to try to reach a demo-like state in the next couple of months, so that way I can understand where I want to take this game and what I really want to make the final product. So once I can finish the demo, I'll know how long the game will actually take to develop. If I need to add some more things, I can do all of that, and I'll still have a playable demo for you guys or for myself. So that way, if I need to make any cuts, I can do it then once the demo is finished. But I think the point is I'm learning a lot and I'm having fun making games, right? Maybe what I actually release isn't the full potential of these ideas, which I feel like is the case for me and maybe a lot of developers. I hope at the very least I can make something that is fun and that captures the essence of what I'm trying to make, right? So far this game is coming along nicely, but I have two issues still. One, I hate the way my character looks right now. I mean, it's cool, but it's not 3D platformer cool. I've talked a little bit about I dislike the way 3D platformers focus on characters, but I'm starting to understand why they do it. If you give this character all these different abilities, you want them to at least have some sort of interesting design to them. I need to work on my character design at some point, but this is now the second or third version of this character, and I need to go back to the drawing board and really figure out what I want this character to look like. In fact, the old versions of this character have way more personality than what it is currently. And the second problem I'm having, I want to start placing game assets and building levels and creating a hub world that I can start getting comfortable with. I think the hub world is one of the most important parts of 3D platformers, and my game doesn't have a hub world yet, so it doesn't really feel like a game yet because there's no main space. At some point, I need to start putting visual markers in the game and designing what the game world really looks like, and I think starting with the hub world is going to really help me start putting this game together a lot more. So those two things are what I'm going to be working on in the future. If you have any ideas for this type of game with the mechanics or any design ideas, please help me out. I could use help from someone with a character design background just to try to help me understand how I can make my character look a lot better. And then I'm going to move on to level design and the hub world, and we'll figure it out from there. Thank you for watching. Thank you for checking out my project. I appreciate you guys. This is the Game Courier channel. Take care. Peace.